Hi everyone, welcome to today's webcast titled The Software-Defined Approach to Transforming Your Data Center. I'm Yelena Anger, Marketing Manager here at Insight, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. The webcast console you're looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured, and the presenter will address them at the end of the session. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. And now I'd like to turn this presentation over to Ken Diamond, Practice Development Manager. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yelena. I appreciate the intro. I want to thank everybody for attending. I know your time is valuable nowadays, and I do appreciate you spending it with us to talk about how software-defined approach is transforming the data center. As Yelena said, my name is Ken Diamond. I'm the Practice Development Manager here at Insight. I have been doing IT for over 29 years. The last 4+ years here at Insight, I was brought over with an acquisition with a company called DataLink. My previous role here at Insight was a Senior Solutions Architect, in which I went out and supported the pre-sales activities with our account executives. My specialization is, of course, the Cisco data center and security, and expanding that into software-defined and automation. They've asked us to include something on this slide that talks personal about us and a fun fact. And the picture in the right-hand corner is actually off my back deck of my house that we just purchased late last year. If it wasn't for a lot of traffic on I-20 here in Atlanta, Georgia, I would not have been rerouted by Waze and driven past this house, which we saw was for sale. Without that traffic, I never would have found this house and would not be able to see that sunrise in the morning. So let's get started. The agenda today, we're going to go through introductions, which we just completed. I do want to kind of go over some of the benefits of the software-defined approach and how or why is it applicable for you and your organizations. And then we're going to talk about two different technologies today, specifically with the Cisco platforms, which is Cisco API and, of course, Cisco Tetration. And these two have two different approaches to their software-defined solutions. And we're going to cover some of those to kind of help demystify some of these technologies. And then we're going to do closing remarks and go through a Q&A. So throughout this presentation, if you do have a question, please feel free to ask it in our Q&A section. And it should be located on the lower bar or within the window already present on your screen. If we do have individuals monitoring that queue, if they do not answer it in line, we will queue it up at the end and answer those accordingly. So we're going to start off today with a couple IDG reports. We did a survey of 200 C-suite director and above CISO, CTO personnel that has organizations of 5,000 or more employees. The average employee from this survey was 30,000. So you're getting a good indication from some large organizations of what they're doing, what they're experiencing. So it gives us some insight on the industry. A couple of the information that we derived from this report was that 41% of organizations delayed or abandoned their IT modernization initiatives in 2019. And what really stood out was the reasons why. So you're going to see that, competing priorities, their focus is typically driven by day-to-day activity, or they're responding to certain issues instead of looking for that modernization or that proactive approach. A lack of clear roadmap or strategy on what they're trying to achieve. And then, of course, first and foremost in today's age is, of course, data privacy and security concerns. We have to keep that in the back of our mind no matter what we do within the data center, because the data center touches everything. And an unsecured data center is just inviting issues. It'll, sad to say, make you famous. Now, 2 out of 3 IT decision makers say that IT modernization is an essential to business transformation. So achieving your business goals will only be satisfied by ensuring the leveraging and the utilization of the new architectures and services to provide the business's needs and requirements. A couple other statistics that stood out, 45% are in the early stages of modernization. So we do have some that are just starting out this venture. And as we go through these slides, we'll kind of point out some of the loopholes to avoid, some of the things that you may want to watch out for. So where are we going? This quote I actually like, because I've been in the business for a long time. So I've seen the progression of the LAN to work groups to having your computer room in a closet down the hall to building out complete data centers. And then now leveraging colo facilities, remote locations, and of course, cloud services. So the constructs that we had previously are changing. Those structures and architectures, they may still exist, but they don't apply to the modern network and modern applications. So modernizing your network will be essential to begin to leverage some of the benefits of these new fabrics, platforms, and of course services. So why software-defined data center? Well, you want to be able to become flexible and elastic. I like that word elastic because it gives you the ability to expand and contract as needed, so that you're able to provide services depending on what type of company you are. You may have to have certain times within the year a more compute capacity for processing or what have you. So having the ability to provide those compute resources as needed gives you that flexibility without having to constantly have that infrastructure cost, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud. I think first and foremost with the software-defined approach is you want to make sure that your operations are streamlined. They're efficient and are what we call low touch points, that any of the day-to-day tasks are simplified, not to a point where you would, put someone there who is not qualified to do those jobs, but makes it easier and automated so that it reduces the human error risk that's associated with any type of change within your environments. You also want to make sure that you have consistency within your environments across platforms, whether it is policy or security constructs. You want to make sure that those are applied equally, no matter where you're located or where the data is located. Now, this next bullet point about reducing complexity in manual processes, I want to clarify reducing complexity, because by definition, these technologies are complex and any other software-defined constructs. The underlying or the underlay are complex structures, so you have to have a good understanding of routing and switching and the physical aspects, the physical requirements. But once you have those constructs in place and built out, the operations become less complex. The manual processes are no longer so manual intensive, but are more automated, so that you are reducing that human error risk from your environment. And of course, today's day and age, the increased demand for application performance, the end user, your customer, whether that be in-house or external customers, they're not going to be able to, or they do not tolerate any type of latency or issues. They want everything now. They want it accessed now. They want it working 100%. So, building out infrastructures that provide the always-on capabilities with the security, with the visibility, and the management capabilities is what the businesses now demand. And as we move forward, the increase of network devices, even which increases the requirement for identity services capabilities and some other security integration within the data center will be driven more and more. So what does the software-defined data center offer? Well, it's streamlined, automated operations. So what does that mean? Well, again, it simplifies those manual processes so that it reduces the inherent risk of human error. And as we all know, 80% of all outages is caused by human error. Eliminate that aspect, you now have a more stable environment in which you could operate from. And stability gives you a baseline in which you could base your performance, base your application performance across. Provisioning through automation. This allows you to expand and contract as need be. If you need to add services and you have the constructs built within a software-defined environment, when you add additional resources, those usually just get bolted on. And the policies and security and ACLs and any type of policy enforcement follows that no matter where it is within the fabric. And I'll show you and walk you through how the two different solutions we're going to talk about today, how that applies. Now, I want to pause for a second. There might be several questions about other software-defined technologies out there like NSX or any of the other Arista or white box capabilities. We have those capabilities in-house, and we'd be more than happy to talk through those with you. If you have any questions, we could actually schedule additional webinars to go over those technologies as well. Today's just going to be focused on the Cisco solutions. But again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And a few other things about the SDDC offers is, of course, the flexibility, the scale, and predictable application performance. I think that is probably the underlying best offer or best solution that it's able to provide, is that you now have the predictable environment in which you can test, validate, and build modeling capabilities off of it. The way the software-defined data center is put into place is the first thing is they separate the management plane with the data plane. And by doing so, you now have the ability to have the programmability, the visibility, the monitoring, the management capabilities separated from the actual data flow. And what that gives you is it gives you a lot more control over the management of the data flow. It gives you the capabilities of providing segmentation or what we call a zero trust or whitelist architecture. And it gives you those tools needed to identify or truly see what's actually on your network, identify any issues with your network, and get that analytics and performance information from your fabric so that you could make more intelligent decisions as far as configuration and assignment of resources within this environment. A couple different solutions that we talk about today, we have two different approaches. One is more of a hardware fabric approach, and the other one is a workload approach. And we'll see how these two solutions differ but satisfy the same requirements. Some of you may be asking these questions that you see here. We all are. All organizations do. How can we ensure compliancy with any change within the fabric? How am I going to integrate this within my existing data center and existing infrastructures? Do I need to retrain all my staff? All these questions are very valid. And that's the reason why we put these webinars on, to show that just because it's new technology, that you can engage a partner like Insight to help you identify opportunities or where you can apply this technology, and how we could take you from where you are today to that modernized network or data center. So here are a breakdown of some of the insight services that we provide, and it is beginning to end. We could come in and help perform assessments and do application dependency mappings. We could do solutions positioning, whether it's a Cisco solution or other vendors or other companies' solutions. We could do proof of concepts on sites, limited production deployments, and of course, full production deployment. And I think one of the benefits that Insight provides is we actually can provide that run book or that operationalizing of the new technology within your environment. We have a national footprint with 300 plus services delivery teammates with multiples of certifications. We actually have lots of experience in this space, and we have the capability of showing what we've done before. If you get a chance to browse to insightcdc.com, under the resources tab, you could see case studies of just a few of what we were able to do. And the national networking practice, we have people who could come in there and help you envision where you need to go. What type of business requirements that you may have, help uncover some of those requirements so that we could take you from that envisioning process to actually building an architecture that meets your business's needs. And again, first and foremost, security. We have a national security practice that is second to none. Jason Rader came over from RSA, so we have a senior management that knows security end to end and is able to provide that. We also have integration labs in Chicago, and we have labs in Tempe, Arizona, and call center in Knox in Florida, Chicago, and Arizona. So we have that national footprint to provide services no matter where you're located. And of course, we are a worldwide company as well. Now, Cisco is one of our premier partners. We are a gold partner. We have the 5 master certifications that Cisco provides. And last year, we received 5 awards. We're America's Partner of the Year, Customer Experience Partner of the Year, Marketing Partner of the Year. And you could see that we have a great relationship. We're a $1.3 billion partner with Cisco. So we have great working relationships. We're able to work very well with Cisco solutions. Here are 2 technologies that we're going to be covering today. The application-centric infrastructure, which is Cisco's first foray into the software-defined data center, and Tetration, which if some of you have heard about Tetration before, I want to kind of reintroduce it to you. Before, it was strictly an application-dependent mapping tool, but it is a lot more. And I think after we go through a couple of these slides, it'll open you up to what Tetration has as far as possibility. So Cisco ACI. Cisco ACI is a policy-based SDN, or software-defined networking solution, that Cisco put together that started from the infrastructure. It had a requirement for the Nexus 9K switching, high-speed switching environment, which did provide high-speed switching and routing capabilities. That was comparable second to none. It provided that redundant capability within your fabric, the high-speed throughput, the multiple port so that you can expand as needed, whether 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig type solutions. And they built the SDN based on that architecture. And they started within the data center because that's where Cisco lives. The SDN portion, or the ACI software, is provided through APIC controllers. The APIC controllers then control how the routing and switching is done through the underlay, which is the fabric itself, and the overlay, which is the constructs in which you build. You define objects, you define contracts, you define the application network profiles in which everything then communicates. This infrastructure is what allows you to provide that automation, that security, the mobility, and the visibility of your actual infrastructure. And we're going to cover some of these throughout these next few slides. But then they went and expanded it from the hardware-based approach and then extended it out to remote leaf capabilities. So if you have a remote site that needed to extend those policies and that security architecture out to that remote location without having the spine and leaf requirement, it now has that capability. It also extends it into the cloud or to the colo facility. So let's go ahead and take a look at how these constructs kind of got started and what type of integration they do. One of this slide is actually, I think, provides as much information within one slide as possible that I'm going to talk through. And I don't want to get too technical, even though if you do have technical questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A section. I want to leave this as not high level, but conceptual so that you understand how this integration actually works. So the hardware platform that ACI utilizes, or the ACI fabric, is a spine leaf architecture. It's actually a clause architecture. It's the same architecture that our telephone switching, long-distance telephone switching systems are based on. Or if you actually look at a modern switch, the actual switch itself with the backplane is clause architecture. So essentially, you're unboxing that switch and then adding as many ports to it as need be. Now, the spines are the forwarding platform or the bus, and the leaves are the actual ports and how you would connect to the outside world. ACI creates the fabric between the spine leaf, and it leverages VXLAN communication with an ISIS routing architecture. This is a point-to-point tunneling solution so that there are no broadcasts. You don't have to worry about spanning tree. So there's some design limitations of the legacy constructs, that three-tier switching architecture, that are now no longer valid within the ACI fabric. So you can design around those issues. Everything would connect to the leaf, whether it be servers, whether it be blade centers, routers, or any external connectivity would then connect to the leaf switches. And then you would control how they would communicate and what they would communicate with through, excuse me, the ACI overlay constructs. And those are the objects or the endpoint groups, and the contracts. And these are the ACLs allowing people to communicate. And then, of course, the application network profiles in which you're stitching everything together that allows the communication through the fabric. Now, the beauty of the ACI fabric is then you could do what's called service stitching. You could actually force traffic through load balancers or firewalls or any other network services that you would like to stitch into that path to ensure it gets inspected or properly providing load balancing capabilities and any type of WAF capabilities. It gives you the flexibility to create some complex structures with the ability to integrate as far as identity services or integrate into your security overlay so that you can move from a whitelist architecture in which only things that you allow to communicate will communicate, to an intent-based architecture, which means that you can leverage identity services engine and tie user profiles or user context and define exactly what they're able to communicate with and what they're able to access. One of the integration aspects of ACI is it allows you to integrate hypervisors in which you can push down those endpoint groups down to the virtual environment or virtual compute environment so that those EPGs are set up, for instance, within VMware as port groups. So as a server administrator brings up a server and you have already identified that type of server, whether it be an SQL database or Active Directory controller or whatever you define that is. If that EPG is already created, the contracts are already built, and the application network profile is already assigned, once that server administrator assigns it to that endpoint or that port group, the security is already there. There is no rewriting of ACLs. There is no additional services that you have to engage. It's done. So the beauty of this is once you build out this infrastructure, this forwarding or underlay, and define what you want to communicate, everything else is done automatically for you. There is no reconfiguring. You're leveraging what has already been built unless you're building out new. And then that is when you could start leveraging the automation aspects and some of that integration as far as the REST APIs and leveraging JSON and XML programmability. So I know I was a little long-winded there, but we'll start getting into some of the aspects of ACI. The good news is I could talk about ACI all day. The bad news is I could talk about ACI all day, and I tend to drag on, so I'm going to get moving. One of the newer solutions that they have is the Multisite capability. Multisite allows you to create an IP network and leverage communication across this and keep consistency between two separate data centers. There are some limitations as far as the latency, but if you live within that latency capabilities, you are able to benefit from communication between these two fabrics, and keeping the policy and security consistent across these two data centers is paramount. It's predictable, it's defendable, and it's something that you can test fully and verify. One of the biggest things is, we have to continually verify that what we have in place, the constructs that we put in place, are secured. We constantly have to have that checks and reinforcements. The MSO, the multi-site orchestrator, or the multi-fabric orchestrator, as what it's termed now, gives you that capability that it's able to push the same policies across the board so that there is consistency no matter where you're located. And this becomes more and more prevalent, not just in the multi-site environment where you're talking about two on-prem data centers, but when you extend it into the cloud. This is the other aspects that we are leveraging within the multi-cloud world, and that is the remote leaf. The remote leaf allows you to attach, whether it is a remote location or an extension from your data center, without having to build out a spine leaf architecture and leveraging APIC controllers on-prem. This is to add those small site or that same capability within that remote site without having to the increased cost of that infrastructure. We have successfully done this for several customers. It works well for those locations that may require a small server implementation, whether it's a HyperFlex capable environment. Apply those policies without having to do a full-blown data center. Integration with your cloud. We're going to highlight AWS here because it's actually been baked in. We've been doing AWS for a while now. Extending the ACI architecture into the cloud, AWS Cloud, gives you that same capability. So it enforces the policies and security controls within the AWS Cloud with using native AWS constructs. You're leveraging the CSR1K and the multi-site orchestrator and the ACI Anywhere capable virtual devices. And what it does is it's basically a translator. It creates the constructs within AWS so that it meets the Cisco ACI construct. This one is a little bit more technically intricate. I do recommend, if this is something that you're interested in, it takes a lot longer to explain this, how it's actually integrated within the cloud. I do welcome you engaging us, in which we'll be able to walk you through and show you a couple of our solutions that we've come up with, and how our customers were able to successfully implement this to keep the security across their on-prem and AWS Cloud environment. The next technology that we want to cover is Cisco Tetration. Now, Tetration, when it first came out on the market, they were marketing it as a application dependency mapper. So it didn't have a lot of the features and benefits that it has today. So they wanted everyone to kind of get their hands on it. They wanted to see what it's capable of before the actual power of Tetration was actually being released. So it kind of got a bad name because of the price tag. It is very expensive. But I'll ask this question. I think it's the expense of Tetration relative to your environment. It may actually be a cost benefit or a reduced cost solution for the true whitelist or true microsegmentation solution than it is to upgrade your environment to a certain platform and to leverage certain technology. And we'll get into that in just a second, because I want to kind of go over exactly the benefits of Tetration and how it actually operates. So they're rebranding Cisco Tetration as a holistic workload protection for multi-cloud data centers. The beauty of Tetration is it doesn't matter what it's running across. Tetration leverages these light agents running on the workloads themselves to gather the telemetry information, inventory information, compliance information, as long as that agent is able to communicate back to the analytics engine of Tetration. It is able to be managed and, of course, have the appropriate security or whitelist architecture applied to it. It doesn't matter if it's in the cloud, doesn't matter if it's in a colocation facility, doesn't matter if it's within the data center or any data center. It doesn't matter what hardware it's running across, what virtual environment it has. It could be Hyper-V, it could be VMware. It doesn't matter. It's loaded on the actual workload itself. Now, there are some restrictions on what operating system these agents are able to be loaded on and communicate across. But if you fall outside that list of operating systems and versions, it has the ability to communicate with hardware sensors, the Nexus 9K hardware platforms that Cisco has. It has the ability to get telemetry information directly from it. You also have the ability to access ER-span and other information and integrating with hypervisors to gather holistic view of your data center, your application, and your performance. So with Tetration, you now have the ability to have that network traffic visibility. So you are able, through ER-span and NetFlow capabilities, actually see the traffic and the information crossing your fabric. You can see your application behavior. You could then build models based on it so that you could do any type of determine whether or not there is any abnormalities within the communication. So if you have an app that has a standard performance matrix in which you have high utilization in the morning and no utilization during lunch and then high in the afternoon, and that is somehow disrupted, you could then start to troubleshoot and look at what has happened, whether it was something done intentionally or are there any vulnerabilities. If you see an application spin out of control, go to 100% and see a lot more utilization across your network, you now have the visibility to see that and then take appropriate actions. Vulnerability detection. This is one of the aspects that I think is one of the value add for Tetration. Because it's able to do inventory on the actual workload itself, it can tell you what software is on it, what firmware, if there's any type of services. It does compliancy checks. So the analytics engine will actually go out to the NIST databases and identify any vulnerabilities for software, and then it'll run checks within your environment to see do you have any of those vulnerabilities, and are those vulnerabilities protected by any of your policies, which is important. So now you have the ability to not only say, yes, I'm vulnerable, but are you safe with that vulnerability, or do you need to mitigate it, and how will you mitigate it? So it gives you a lot more capabilities to identify and manage your environment. Attributes-based whitelist policy and segmentation. That one I'm going to have to explain a little bit longer. That was a cool sentence, but what does that mean? Well, I now have all your workloads. I have the ability to identify what services are running on that workload, what ports are open, what ports are communicating, who they're communicating with, and the way it should be is I have both sides to that information. So I now have a full view of all your applications, how they're running within your environment, so I have a true dependency mapping. Now, once I have that dependency mapping, I could then create that whitelist architecture that is needed to prevent that east-west infection that ransomware is wreaking havoc with our customers. We want to lock things down so that SQL database isn't going to have communication or create an issue with your AD controllers. All we want is for that communication is authentication or any other Microsoft services, if that. And then lock everything else down so that it reduces that threat vector of having a breach and then expanding throughout your data center. So we're able to lock down to the communication that that is required, or that least privilege architecture, and fully embrace that white list so that communication will not happen unless I allow it, unless the policy allows that communication. And again, this is enforced across platforms. It doesn't matter if you're on-prem or cloud, or like 80% of the environment, the hybrid approach. You're going to be leveraging resources in the clouds, leveraging resources on-prem and at those remote locations, and you're able to provide the policy consistently across the board. Some of the feedback that I get from our field, and we actually have a large field of architects and engineers that provide these services to a lot of companies, is they applying or creating the policies and enforcing those policies with Tetration is second to none. It is the easiest platform to perform whitelist capabilities, and that's talking about whether it's NSX, ACI, or any of the other offerings out in the industry. So it is one of those where if you haven't done so, I do think Tetration is something that you want to look into. And the visibility and forensics capabilities of Tetration provides you with a good looking glass from a security perspective. Sorry about that. And of course, app behavior detection, vulnerability detection, capabilities built in to Tetration. Those are those value add applications that I think is what truly builds the value of that workload protection, that holistic workload protection that Tetration provides. The ability to run reporting, policy simulation, the creation of the whitelist policies, and of course, policy enforcement are second to none. Here's an overlay or a representation of how you can actually interact with Tetration. You have the web GUI capable. You have the REST API, event notification, and of course the Cisco Tetration apps that you can interact with. You then have the ability to bring in the sensors, the telemetry information, and that could be done through the software sensors or the agents that are loaded on the workload itself. The embedded network sensors, those would be for the hardware platforms like the Cisco Nexus, and non-Cisco devices can be integrated as well. And of course, ER-SPAN, that allows you to monitor actual traffic traversing your network, and you have NetFlow capabilities. So streaming telemetry and bringing in configuration data as integrating with any of the hypervisors and load balancers to give that holistic view of your network is what gives Tetration that benefit. Here are some of the things that help enable your DevSecOps capabilities. If you are interested in integrating Tetration into any of your other security applications, you have the ability to integrate with the REST API. You can leverage the Kafka messaging to enable actions as far as your north-south firewalls or any east-west firewalls. And of course, you have the Cisco Tetration applications themselves. So it gives you a wide swath of capabilities to monitor, to manage, to automate your environment from the workload, or the closest to the truth that you can get. Now, at this point, I kind of want to contrast the two solutions, as ACI is the hardware-capable SDN, and the Tetration is more geared towards the workload itself and doesn't really care about the underlying communications. Two different approaches, but both of them can provide the same whitelist capability. The only difference is Cisco ACI does not have the automatic mapping capabilities that Tetration does. Some of the benefits and constraints that each of these solutions have actually work better together. So we actually have customers that are leveraging ACI for the infrastructure, automation, and services stitching capabilities, so that they can leverage the automation aspects of their load balancers and their security devices, et cetera, and also providing that micro-segmentation, visibility, and compliance mechanisms with Tetration within these environments. Either solution works independently. Both solutions work well together, fully integrated, and you have several Cisco validated designs up on the Cisco website that actually cover these architectures. Now, I want to take a moment. So Insight actually has a program starting that they've been working on ever since interesting times has started. It is the Stronger Together program. And what it does is we realize that there are some challenges that we face in the world today, and there are certain requirements that our customers are in dire need of. And this is just some information about how Insight can work with you to kind of work through these challenges to make sure that you are meeting your business needs. And it's just, information out there. If you have questions, feel free to browse through it. These are some of our service offerings and some of our capabilities of what we were able to do and how we face these same challenges that you're facing now. I do actually have a great example is, we are a worldwide company that provides services globally. We have a call center in the Philippines, and we had to technically overnight change 800 personnel from going into the office every day to a remote workforce. And within 48 hours, we were able to achieve that. Now, understand, we had those same challenges that any other organization would face. We had supply chain demands. If when the Philippines locked everything down, they literally locked everything down. So getting equipment for home-based offices out to our employees was challenging. But we were able to work through our supply chain and through our network, and was able to provide either in-home remote capabilities, or we actually provided hotel space right across the street from one of our call centers for people who couldn't do the remote office capabilities. But we were able to overcome our own challenges, and we could share that as one of our, I would say one of our best successes. And that is something that we could actually share with our customers as well. Now, where should we start? What are some of the questions that you have? How can you prepare yourself to take that modernization challenge? It starts with know thyself, and I don't want to become philosophical here, but it's something that has beat into me throughout my career. When you know thyself, you can make better decisions. So understand your infrastructure, your workflows, and your network capacity. That's first and foremost. And unfortunately, a lot of our customers don't. They don't know what they have because of turnover, lack of documentation, through rapid growth, M&A, whether you're doing mergers or acquisitions, whatever the cause, some of that data is skewed. Some of that information is not there. Well, we, working with a partner, a trusted partner, can come in and actually help you identify what you have, identify how it is operating within your environment. And that will give you your baseline in which you can actually start to look at some of these technologies to meet your business needs. So that's when you begin to weigh your options and identify these solutions. Or at this phase, I tend to tell the customer, to thy own self be true, which means identify what your requirements are and leverage the technology that builds upon your each other to meet your business challenges. Enable your staff, leverage the technology that you have, make sure that you are utilizing the technology that you have to its fullest capacity. Go over what your options are as far as transitions, whether they are identifying how many data centers you have and collapsing them, or expanding for a capability, or building out new, or migrating to the cloud. Those are the aspects in which we can come in and actually help you identify and land on the solutions and build a plan on how to get there. The next phase is, of course, preparing your teams, or if it's learning new technology and going out and getting trained and doing, shadowing and in the process of integrating any of that new technology into your existing. But it's also preparing or relearning so that, or what I consider the continuous services improvement capabilities, so that it expands or refines your craft. It's ensuring that you're leveraging the technology a little bit better, integrating that automation. And the way I explain this is the first time you do a business resiliency failover, what you do in 2 active data centers, the first time is going to be your slowest, because you're going to uncover the unknowns. But the more you do it, the faster you get, the more information you have, the better prepared you are for the next one. And eventually it will become an automated process, so it's a click of the button. I don't want to oversimplify that, but that is how you improve. You're constantly going through that improvement process. Well, we could actually come in and help through that process, and also provide the brain power, whether it's staffing or the architectural capabilities to build that end result, or get you through the integration aspects and then the operationalizing of this technology. Insight can be there through this entire process. So for attending today's webinar, all attendees will be entered to win a pizza oven. Now I heard these are actually pretty cool things. I'm not actually in the drawing, so whoever wins, or good luck to you, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. I want to thank you for attending. Do we have any questions within the QA?
We do not, Ken. I don't see any,
Okay.
so give everyone a minute if they do.
Okay. There's one aspect that I kind of wanted to add. In a couple case studies that we have, we did a large energy company, and we integrated their ACI fabric. And the challenges that were brought to us was they had multiple organizations that had to maintain separate security requirements and security overlays. So each organization had their own security constructs that they had to abide by. So ACI was implemented because of the multi-context capability. So each organization was their own context, so they were able to build the infrastructure out, leverage the resources of the shared resources of that virtual environment and SDN capability, but they were separated via context. So they were able to maintain whether it was their HIPAA or FIPS compliancy, NRC type compliancy requirements. And they had 27 different environments in which they wanted to integrate into one, multiple DMZs, the whole bit. They also had a very tight time frame in which they were able to implement. And it's one of those where zero disruption to their operations. And it was within 8 months that they were able to integrate the ACI fabric with zero disruption and meet their guidelines. So that's one of the case studies that you would find on our website. I highly recommend you guys going out and reading. With some of the other case studies that we put together, we've solved some very interesting business needs with this technology. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them over. We are coming up on time. Since I do not see any other questions, we are available if you want to shoot your AE an email. We are here and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions or, if need be, set up an additional call. But I want to thank you for your time. I truly appreciate you spending the time with us. Stay safe, and thank you very much.